Okay, so you've just finished a new piece, right? But something feels off. It's like, technically it's good, the subject is interesting enough, but it's not, I don't know, it's not really grabbing anyone.
Yeah, it's a common problem. And often the missing piece of the puzzle is, well, storytelling.
Storytelling. I'm trying to make art, not write a novel.
And that's where the magic comes in because storytelling in art isn't about, literally writing a book. It's about, how do I put it? It's about creating an experience for anyone looking at your art. It's not said out loud, but it's there on the canvas or in the sculpture or even in a song, whatever you're making.
So it's less about telling a story and more about making the story part of the art itself.
Exactly. Picture this. You're at some big art show and there's this one piece. Let's say it's just a chair, right? But it's crafted really well, you can tell.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now imagine that same chair, but there's like a faded photo tucked under one of the legs and a postcard addressed to like someone with a different last name. Makes you think, doesn't it? It's not just a chair anymore.
Definitely not. Now it's like a whole mystery. It makes you wonder about who sat in it, what their story
And
was.
that's what makes it so cool. Even simple things can have powerful stories in them. And when you, the artist, put those stories in your work on purpose, it changes how people see it. It makes a connection.
It's like that experiment, or whatever it was, where acting students would just stand on a stage
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that.
for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Didn't move, didn't say anything. Awkward, right? But after a while, everyone watching is like trying to figure out what it means. Like they're reading into every little thing, the way they're standing, if they shift their
Our
weight.
our brains just work that way. We love stories. We can't help but make them up, even if there's nothing there.
It's not just some artsy thing either.
Yeah,
Studies show that knowing the story behind a piece of art, even a little bit, it can make people think it's worth more, like they'll pay more for it.
for sure. There was one study that said knowing about the art could increase the value by, get this, 11%.
Whoa, 11%. That's huge.
It's because stories make things stick. They get us emotionally connected, so we remember them better. It's why we teach kids with stories and, like, why we still have myths and legends from, like, forever ago.
Okay, so how do we do it? How do artists take that story power and, use it? I get the chair in the photo, but what about a painting or music? What about that?
Well, that's where we get into how stories are structured. And one of the most powerful ones, one you see everywhere, is called the monomyth. It's also called the hero's journey, and you've definitely seen it before.
Wait, is that like Star Wars?
You got it. Luke Skywalker starts as this nobody on a farm, becomes a Jedi, fights the bad guys. That's basically the hero's journey. But it's not just Star Wars, it's in tons of stories. Ancient myths, Shakespeare, even those big action movies they make now.
Okay, so if, as artists, we're not making epic space movies, how do we use this hero's journey thing?
It's about realizing that your journey as an artist, like how you got here, that's a hero's journey too. Think about it. There was a point where you realized art wasn't just a hobby, it was what you were meant to do, like a, what do they call it? A call to adventure when you decided to actually become an artist.
It's true,
Yeah.
When I was a kid, art was like my thing, my own little world. I would draw and paint forever. Never thought it could be like a real job back then. But
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it now, it makes sense. Those are the first steps. It's like that artist, what's her name? Gwen Seymour. She said drawing wasn't something that she did. It was like part of her.
Exactly. When you share that beginning, that moment you got hooked, it lets people see the real you, the artist. It's powerful stuff. But the hero's journey, well, it's not always easy, is it?
Definitely not. I mean, what artist hasn't had problems? Right.
And those tough times, the doubts, those moments you just want to give up, they matter just as much as the good stuff, maybe even more.
Because it makes you relatable.
Yeah, being vulnerable is huge. When you can talk about messing up or setbacks, even failing, it lets people connect with you. It's
Right.
like, oh, I'm not the only one.
And it's inspiring to see someone push through that, don't you think?
For sure. Think about the best stories, the ones everyone loves. They're usually about getting through tough times, coming out stronger.
There are these artists I follow online, they get it. This one photographer, amazing work, but she's really open about her health stuff, how it makes things hard. And there's a sculptor I like. He talks about how expensive studio space is, always a struggle. Honestly, it makes me respect them even more.
Because it adds something real. We understand them better, why they do what they do, how tough they are. Behind every amazing piece of art, there's a person who had to go through stuff, right? That's inspiring.
So we've got like the start, the call, then the obstacles. What's next on this journey?
Okay, so After those tests, after the challenges, that's when the hero changes, right? They face their fears, work on their weaknesses, and come out different. For artists, it's like when you're really pushing yourself creatively, trying new things, even if it might not work out.
Oh, I know that feeling. Going all in, like down the rabbit hole.
Right. Sometimes you come out with a masterpiece, sometimes it's a bunch of junk you toss out. But no matter what, you grew. You learned something new. You changed just by doing it. And that shows in the art, even if you don't realize it.
It's like those happy accidents, you know. You do something wrong, but it turns out awesome, takes you in a whole new direction.
Exactly. So you've changed, your art is better, your vision is clearer. That's when you hit a big part of the journey, the return.
Return. You mean like showing your work to people?
Exactly.
Sure.
It's scary, right? You're putting yourself out there, taking a risk that people might not like it.
It's weird though, isn't it? Like as artists, we put so much pressure on ourselves. Like everything we make has to be this big important thing, you know,
Mm.
proof that we're like amazing artists.
It's true. It can feel that way. But there's something kind of beautiful about that vulnerability too, right? Putting your heart out there, even though people could be mean or not get it.
Because it's not about the end result, really, is it? It's about the making of it, the whole journey, and letting people see that.
Exactly. And when you think about storytelling like that, it takes the pressure off. It's not about like being some master storyteller. Just be real, share your experience. That's what people connect with.
So ditch the fancy artist statements and just like talk about my story.
Basically. And think about who you're talking to. Are they on Instagram all the time, reading art blogs? On your email list? Go to them.
So it's like building all these little connections, each one showing a different part of your art journey.
I love that. So instead of just posting a photo of your new piece and saying, new work, tell them what's behind it. What got you inspired? What was hard about it? Did you figure something out while you were making it? Put that in your captions, your blog posts, even emails to people who collect your stuff.
Like giving them a behind the scenes look, you know,
Sure.
not just the finished thing, but how it got there.
Yes. And don't be afraid to make it personal. People like people. Right. So let them see you. Share your struggles, the good stuff, even the weird stuff. You know, that's what makes you you.
So instead of saying like what kind of paint I used, I could talk about how making it made me feel or some funny thing that happened in the studio.
Exactly. Oh, and visuals. Don't forget those. Instagram is great for that, showing people your process, like works in progress. Time lapses are cool too.
Love a good time lapse,
Yeah.
like watching magic happen.
Yeah.
And you realize how much work goes into it.
Totally. When people feel like they were part of that, even a little bit, they're more into it. They feel connected.
What about artists who like don't love the camera? Can they share their story without being on like social media all the time?
Of course. You could write blog posts about how you make your art, your inspirations, all that. Or if you like talking more, maybe a podcast. Share your point of view, how you see art, and being creative.
Ooh, a podcast. I like that. I bet a lot of artists would love to hear that, learn from each other, see what it's like for other people making art.
Totally. When you hear someone else's story, you realize you're not alone, right? Makes you feel part of something bigger.
And that's what matters, right? Connecting with people through art, through sharing stories.
Perfectly said. So, last thought for you, as we finish this deep dive into storytelling. If your art could talk, what would it say?
Wow, that's a good one. Makes you realize that every little mark you make, every color, every note you play has a story in it. And our job as artists is to bring those stories out and share them.
The world needs stories. Go out there and tell yours through your art.